Hello, and a wonderful on-passive day to you. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit about working with and understanding the weight that we're in. We've been through a lot, and we've got a little bit longer to go. And as we've probably come to the conclusion of, waiting is an inevitable part of life. And whether it's waiting for a promotion, a medical result, or maybe even just a simple text message, most of us would recognize that waiting is a state of being in a temporary halt or pause, if you will. The key word here being temporary, where actions or progress are suspended until we reach or experience a particular event, situation, or an outcome. It involves a sense of expectation. It involves anticipation, certainly, or most certainly, patience. Often, it's accompanied by a feeling of uncertainty or suspense. It's something to think about here. Waiting can manifest, can come about in several different ways. If we look at the physical portion, how do we see it physically? We may be standing in line, might be, in a waiting room, we're like waiting for a doctor's appointment or something, sitting at a red light even. But it can also be an emotional or a mental state, like waiting for news, waiting for a response, perhaps a resolution of some kind. And it can also be neutral, positive, or negative, depending on how and what the context is of an individual's perspective. So, well, okay, now, of course, in the case of ONPASSIVE, our waiting is an emotional or mental state, since we're not really privy to the physical actions going on behind the scenes. Also, in the case of ONPASSIVE, we're waiting for something that signifies the end of what we're calling a recovery phase, which is a bridge of sorts, if you will, excuse me, got the hiccups, that leads from challenging times and hardship, which is behind us, to what we expect as ease and satisfaction, which we're hoping is in front of us. And needless to say, waiting can be frustrating. It can provoke anxiety on the one side, or satisfying and easy stuff on the other, depending on how we look at it. So, believe it or not, there's something that's called the psychology of waiting. And I mentioned this here because Dr. John Algonquin talked about this a couple of days ago, Sunday, on the Heroes webinar. And I put a link to that in the description box below. Now, the psychology of waiting, rather, is a study of how people perceive and react to waiting, and how these perceptions and reactions are influenced by certain factors, if you will. And these factors can include quite a few things. They can include the length of wait, right? The longer the wait, the more likely we're able to, or probably will feel, negative emotions like boredom, frustration, anger. You get fed up with things as a sort. There's also uncertainty. People are more likely to feel negative emotions if they don't know how long they have to wait, or if they're not certain about certain timelines or deadlines. There's also the factor of fairness. People are more likely to feel negative emotions if they feel like they're being treated unfairly, such as when they see others getting ahead of them in line. Now, that doesn't necessarily ring true or hold true for us in ONPASSIVE right now, but it's still out there in the grand scheme of things. There's also the value of service, where people might find that waiting is easier if they feel like the end product or the end expectation that they get has a lot of value to it. Obviously, that is something we're waiting for with ONPASSIVE. We know that we've got a lot of value in what we're doing. The type of wait can also bear in on how we react to it. Unoccupied time, right? Time that we're just kind of sitting around focusing on the waiting. During those times, people might find that the longer the occupied time is, the more painful it seems, and the post-process wait feels longer than the in-process wait, if you will. I know that sounds kind of weird, But the type of wait, what I'm saying is unoccupied time feels like it's more stressful wait than if you're doing something during your waiting period. I'll put it that way. There's also anxiety. Obviously, anxiety can make us feel a whole lot worse. And waiting alone, if you're in it by yourself, it just kind of draws things out, makes it seem like it's a lot longer than is if we've got a group around us. And obviously, there's personal expectations. And we'll be talking about some of these things because personal expectations, right, unrealistic or high expectations in particular, are going to intensify any disappointment that we feel. So often, periods of waiting are also characterized by a lack of control and unpredictability, and all of these things, right? As if they're not bad enough, they can lead to boredom, frustration, yada, yada, yada. And regardless, we all know at some point we're going to have to wait for something. A lot of us are waiting right now. For members of ONPASSIVE, that waiting has come around. It's become a familiar part of our journey as we navigate through a recovery phase over the next few months or so. But what exactly are we waiting for? Well, we're waiting for the OES, actually ONPASSIVE in general, to come back online. We're waiting for things to happen like the implementation of the payment processing systems and the release of products for sales to members and sales in the public sector. Now, primarily, we want to have some practical solutions to the needs in our lives, right? Those products and solutions from ONPASSIVE offer. But ultimately, with regard to personal finance, we're waiting to receive commissions from those sales so we can get on with our lives, on with our plans. And now I suspect at the earliest, we're going to see these things happening towards the end of the year. And I say this because we know how Mr. Mufareh works, methodically and with quality. He doesn't just throw something together and hope it flies. Remember, too, that once released, there's a stabilization process that ONPASSIVE goes through, as does any good, especially, software company, right? And we'll have to go through that too. So we'll likely be moving into 2025, right? The first quarter, before we start looking at phase 2, which is going to happen after we go through the recovery phase here and we see the OES and all of that. So as much as I'm believing it's possible to see things happening in the next week or two, I'm also prepared to be in the waiting period for a little bit longer. Now, how we can wait, that can make a big difference for us personally and can have an effect on those that wait with us. Of course, some ways of waiting are better than others. The better ways result from being able to manage expectations, because doing that allows us to endure the wait with a positive mindset. And that's a lot healthier than the other thing, a non-positive mindset. So how do we do that? How do we manage expectations? How do we manage what we expect while we wait for the result at the end of the wait, especially if it turns out to be longer than what we expected? Well, first thing we have to do is set realistic expectations, right? Accurate information and clear communication can help us do that. Now, right now, we've been told the wait can take anywhere from a couple of weeks to a few months. Put another way, we've been told these things that we might start seeing in the recovery can start to happen as soon as the first week in September, which is next week, or as late as the end of November, with a few more weeks to look at initiating what we're calling phase 2. So I guess a realistic expectation is to believe changes can start as early as next week, but keeping in mind that they may go through the end of the year. Just be realistic about it, right? We can also reframe our perception. That's another way that we can help to manage our expectation. Reframing our perception of the wait is done by focusing on positive aspects like preparation or even relaxation. Also, we can distract and engage. We can use the waiting time productively to engage in other activities, enjoyable activities. I know that I have been doing that. I've been doing everything from spending time with the grandkids to watching movies with my spouse, my wife, my lovely bride. I replaced ceramic tiles around the fireplace, fixed a roof out at the farm, just lots of stuff, keep engaged, do a lot of stuff, my yard work. We can also practice mindfulness. Now, when we look to the future about things we can't control, it's going to produce anxiety. And looking to the past and dwelling on disappointments that can produce frustration or even depression, mindfulness or present moment awareness, as some call it, relieves or reduces anxiety and frustration. We can also look for more information. If possible, right, we can gather information about the wait or about what it is that we're waiting for, and we can know more, and knowing more can reduce uncertainty. There's also what we call positive thinking. We've heard about that. So if we employ positive thinking, that means we're just focusing on some positive outcomes and reminding ourselves that the wait will eventually end with positive results. Man, that's a favorite one of mine. Now, for those that find themselves frustrated, there are ways to get out of it. There are ways to mitigate frustration, if you will. The first thing you got to do, take control. You got to engage in activities that provide a sense of agency, right? This means that you've got to be participating in tasks or actions that give you the feeling of control, autonomy, and empowerment. Agency refers to the ability to make choices, to take actions, and to influence the outcomes of those. And when waiting, engaging in activities that promote that type of agency can help to counteract the feelings of powerlessness and frustration. Nobody wants those, right? We can also get help or go after support. There's lots of us waiting here for the same things. Reaching out for social support from others, other members, other founder members, even if you will, can alleviate some negative emotions because you can get together and all of you can lift each other. There's also a way of practicing patience, and that can help us to get out of the frustration, developing self-compassion and understanding. And again, we can reframe the whole perspective and view waiting as an opportunity for growth or for learning. All of these things will help us get through this thing and make sure that whenever it is that we reach whatever it is we're going to reach, we're okay with it, we understand it, and make the best use of it. Waiting is unavoidable. It's an unavoidable aspect of life, but by understanding the psychological factors that are involved and using strategies to manage expectations and to alleviate frustrations, we can make the wait a lot more enjoyable. That's been my experience, and it's one of the reasons why I've enjoyed the ONPASSIVE journey from day one. To me, it's full of all sorts of thrills and excitements, and by adopting a good mindset, being patient, and reframing how we see the wait, right, we can turn the wait into a positive and productive experience. I hope you've enjoyed this. I certainly appreciate you listening, and please like, share, and subscribe, and have an awesome, awesome ONPASSIVE day. See ya.